Good evening. Welcome to the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission, November 12th. Let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call.
Commissioner Hernandez is absent this evening. Commissioner Polgar? Here. Commissioner Ruddick?
I'm here.
Vice Chair Benjamin?
I am present.
And Chair Holt?
Here. Our first item is the approval of minutes for Tuesday, October 22nd. I'm not sure. I don't think we're going to be able to do that, correct? Because we do not have Commissioner Hernandez here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We do have Benjamin. Yeah, we're good. Never mind.
I would abstain since I was absent. I move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, now's the time for public comment. This is for public comment on items that are not on our agenda. I don't have any green cards. If anybody wishes to speak on any items that aren't on the agenda tonight, feel free to raise your hands. I don't see any. So I'm going to close the public comment period. We're going to move into our public hearing item. I do have only one speaker card here. So if folks do wish to speak on this item, there are green cards over in the back over there. Please fill one of those out, and you can hand them over to us here, so we can make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Garrison for a presentation.
Good evening, Chairman Holt and members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Doug Garrison. I'm the project planner. This project, it's what used to be the thrift store, Coastside Seniors, right next to the gas station on the corner of Highway 1 and Kelly. It's currently vacant. The proposal from Abundant Grace, Coastside Worker, is to reuse that building as a workforce development center, providing the services they currently provide, plus being able to enhance those services somewhat. So the basic components of the project, reusing that existing building, they're not expanding it, not making it taller, bigger. Abundant Grace Coastal Worker, I think most people are familiar with. It's a local nonprofit, provides employment opportunities for low-income and homeless populations. The permits required for this are coastal development permit, a use permit, parking exception, and site design. The basic changes to the property are mostly to the interior of the main building, which at one time was a single-family home and then at some point was converted to commercial uses. So they will be building 2 new restrooms. One's completely ADA compliant. They'll be adding a couple of washers and dryers for the clients to use, computer access, a small kitchen for heating up a bowl of oatmeal, light smacks, that sort of thing. The site will have a fair number of changes. They will be making the property ADA accessible compliant. They'll be adding designated ADA van accessible space, new ADA ramp accessing the main office, front entrance, as well as access to the rear of the building. So if you kind of take a bird's eye view, you can see it's kind of a little rough looking site today. What would have been the front yard's completely paved over with concrete today. That area was used as an informal parking lot for the thrift store. It's not striped, or it wouldn't meet current standards for parking, and certainly not for ADA accessible. It's a little bit of an older Google photo. Those, if you look in the backyard, there's a number of storage sheds. Those have all been removed. That's cleaned up and cleared out now. A couple of key elements to the site. The driveway down the western side goes down to what would have been a garage back when it's a single-family home. That area will have staff parking and the ADA accessible van parking. There's a second driveway cut on the east side. That one's, it's substandard. It's not wide enough to meet current requirements. So rather than trying to squeeze a couple more parking spaces there, we thought it made more sense to dedicate that for pedestrians and bicyclists so that we don't have conflicts between the cars and people coming and going otherwise. So we treat this like any other land use application. There's a fairly consistent review process. We start the big picture, seeing if it's consistent with the land use plan designation, the zoning designation. We start to focus in on the site layout. Does it make sense? Does it accommodate all the functions that are required there? Does it meet off-site parking? And then we look at, because this is an existing facility, what are the design constraints? The buildings are already there. What can we change and what can't we? And that became an issue with some of the parking. We look at the landscaping, the amenities, and then kind of as a last step, we solicit public comments, review those, and then see if the project needs to be revised to accommodate some of those comments. So this is from Kelly Avenue. You can see that sort of substandard driveway on the east side. There is an empty tree well out on the street that currently has a city 15-minute parking sign in it with a green curb in front of the building. You can see there's an existing wood fence that runs along the western side, continues down on the gas station. That doesn't show up in this, but there is a chain link fence gate in the driveway on the west side that it is locked, connects between the house and that wooden fence, precludes access to the rear of the yard. On the east side, there's about a 5-foot wooden fence at the rear of the house with a lockable gate, and that wooden fence continues around the perimeter of the rear yard. Looking at this side, you can see a little bit closer look at that fence. I would note that one of the things that Abundant Grace does is they provide employment opportunities at Potrero Nuevo Farm, Poplar Beach cleanup, and a lot of the workers, they collect at informal places like parking lots. And it's not just for Abundant Grace. Contractors pick up day labor, people need their house, garage cleaned out. And right here at this gas station, that's one of the places where they collect today. So as a location, I guess from a marketing standpoint, there's already some evidence that it's a good location for laborers to gather. This would get them off of other people's property into a more controlled setting. This is from the rear. You can see that wooden fence I was describing. This is on property that belongs to Shoreline Station. That's their parking lot. There's also about a 20-foot wide paved asphalt drive that comes, you can see a corner of that. That provides access to the AT&T telecommunications building off to the left. But all of that does belong to Shoreline Station. There were some comments from the owner about putting a fence in here. We're happy to work with them, but it seems like the fence would be on their property. Looking up Kelly Avenue, if you look up the street, you can see how the sidewalk is not out at the curb. It's set back a few feet. And so the way we've designed this, it would extend straight down that sort of, I think they're about 4 foot wide blocks of concrete down the middle there. There would be a decorative fence, about a 3 foot high picket fence inside of that sidewalk, delineating the private from public space. And a tree would be planted replacing the 15-minute parking sign. We considered requiring some landscaping along the curb that is consistent with what you see further up Kelly. And after getting into it, it's currently 15-minute parking. Might make sense for this use to keep it that way as a drop-off and pick-up curb, in which case it doesn't really make sense to landscape that area closest to the curb. And also, as the sidewalk goes west, it jogs out towards the street to connect to the sidewalk along the gas station, which is at the curb. So this just gives people a little more room to maneuver and pick their best path through there. On the site plan, you can see the new tree out at the street. In the front, what would have been the front yard, there's a picket fence installed that surrounds that front yard area, and it clearly delineates where the public sidewalk is, where the private space is. You can see the ADA parking space, direct path to the access to the front office. And the landscaping's kind of unique. It's above grade planter boxes. They'd be planted with agricultural plants. They'd be sourced from local farms, from the Potrero Nuevo farm. It would be different. It would be symbolic of the mission they have. It would provide a character defining element to the design. The rear yard, which is currently pretty much bare dirt, they would put in 2 foot wide pavers, permeable, plant 4 new trees, I believe they're fruit trees, and then put in some picnic tables that could be used by the clients of Abundant Grace while they're waiting for their job assignments or to meet with a counselor, that sort of thing. You can see in the floor plan the 2 new restaurant rooms with showers. The accessory building in the back would have a commercial grade refrigerator where they store produce that they harvest from the farm and then distribute to local nonprofits. They are proposing a small tool shed back there. I'll get to this in a minute. One thing that's not shown on here that we're recommending is another gate on the eastern side that would be lockable at night, that would sort of secure the facility a little bit more. So when we're reviewing land use entitlements, we look at compatibility with the neighborhood. We look at intensity of use, the hours they're open. Is it somehow going to make life difficult for the neighbors? Does it work in that location? And part of that is looking at the site layout, the landscaping, parking, those sorts of things. And I've walked through some of that, and this was a collaborative effort with city staff and the project architect. We went through a few designs to come up with the landscaping and the parking circulation layout. So coastal development permits are basically to protect coastal resources like environmentally sensitive habitat areas or beach access. This one requires a coastal development permit just because of the change in intensity, but there aren't a lot of coastal resources at risk here. The use permit controls the operational parameters of a project, and that's probably the more important permit here. And this is where, in the resolution, if you look in section D, conditions 1 through 4, we wrote some conditions specifically for this project. Limits the hours they can be open, clarifies that it's not to be used for residential or overnight use. Does allow a little bit of flexibility if they have some training classes that go a little bit late. The planning director does have some discretion to provide up to 2 hours of extended operation from time to time. There's a condition that just states they have to comply with all federal and state health safety regulations. As a condition of the use permit, that's useful that if at some point they're not in compliance with those things, it could form the basis for revoking a use permit. We also, in response to some of the comments, limit where the clients can gather. It's not out on the front sidewalk in the public space. It's in designated areas inside the building or in the rear yard. And again, the design intuitively channels people into that area so that they work synergistically together. And some of that is up to the applicant in the way they manage their program to have house rules to manage the people that are there. And then also, we don't always require this for use permits. In this case, there's a condition E5 requires review in 12 months by the community development director. Minor changes can be imposed at that time, or the community development director can refer this to the planning commission if there are more substantial issues that need to be resolved. So kind of the final step, we had extensive public outreach. We went beyond what we're required to do. Mailing list was 500 feet as opposed to our typical 300 feet. Because we were concerned that using the tax assessor's addresses for properties for, say, the schools, it would probably just go to the district office. So we also hand-delivered the notices to both Cunha and Hatch, as well as the Boys and Girls Club. And there was also an article independently published by the Half Moon Bay Review. We sent out a blast on the community e-news. I believe we posted it on Nextdoor. So it was widely distributed, and we did get comments on this. There was sort of one comment from the owners of Shoreline Station, and then all the other comments were sort of bundled together. The Shoreline Station comment was they'd had in the past problems with homeless people taking up and camping in their parking lot, creating problems. And they were concerned that this project might attract people. They also requested a fence to separate the project site from their property. A couple of points. As I noted before, just from a marketing standpoint, this area does seem to attract people who need these services, and sort of the overarching goal here is to get them into a program that can help them and get them out of parking lots and homelessness and into jobs and services. As far as the fence goes, the only place you could really put a fence that would accomplish what they're requesting, at least from my review, would be on their own property. And we'll certainly be happy to work with them if they want to install a new fence, but it's not part of this project, just to make that clear. The other comments really got into security, concern over if there were criminals or sex offenders using the services provided by Abundant Grace in close proximity to the schools, that sort of thing. And we think that some of those concerns have been addressed already through the conditions of approval that are included in the resolution. We did meet with sheriff's staff this afternoon, went over that. They had a couple of recommendations which we're proposing as new conditions, not in the resolution. One would require a new gate on the east side and also installation of outdoor video cameras to cover the access and outdoor public areas of the property. It seems like from the letters, there's a lot of concern about what Megan's Law is, what the requirements are, who can use that facility, who can't. I think I'm going to turn that over to the city attorney. She can do that now, or if you want to defer that to your back and forth, that's up to you.
I think that'd be great, please.
Good evening, commissioners. Yeah, I'm just going to provide a pretty high-level summary of Megan's Law. It's not a land use or local governance or environmental law.
I'm sorry, Winter, if you could just make sure you're
I'm
speaking
not
really
close
good.
enough. There we go. I'm just going to provide a pretty high-level summary of what the statute is and what it does. It has not come up before in my time here. It's not a typical law that's considered in land use decisions, but just given the comments, we thought it would be helpful to have the context and what it provides and what it doesn't. So Megan's Law in California is codified in the Penal Code in section 290.46, and it requires the state's Department of Justice to establish and regularly update a website that includes information available to anyone in the public that is basically the public information that's contained in the state's sex offender registry. So this information includes sex offenders' name, aliases, age, gender, race, physical description, and if there is one available, a photograph. And it also includes a description of the criminal convictions that require the individual to register, and the county and zip code where the individual last registered. All convicted sex offenders for qualifying convictions must register with local law enforcement at certain periods of time. This database of public information, there are also related provisions of the law that relate to how employers and businesses may and may not use the information that's on the database. I won't go into it too much, but just so you know, there are restrictions. Employers and potential employers cannot use the registry information for adverse employment decisions unless it qualifies for an exception. So either a state statute says a daycare or school can't hire someone on the list unless you qualify for one of those exceptions, or it's being used to, quote, protect a person at risk. Employers can't use that information in that way, and businesses can't use information to deny benefits, privileges, or services they provide, again, unless they qualify for this exception. There are some other, because I know in the comments there were questions raised about individuals who are listed on the registry and interactions with the nearby schools. So there are several provisions of the penal code that cover that. One applies to a very limited subset of registered offenders residing near schools. Again, I think this project doesn't provide any residential components, so that provision isn't particularly applicable. There are regulations dealing with registrants entering school campuses and needing to get permission to do so, and having public disclosure in certain circumstances. Again, I don't think this application is authorizing or really relevant to that provision. And then there's a provision prohibiting loitering, prohibiting registered sex offenders from loitering near schools. The code and courts have subsequently defined loitering to be pretty specific activity, not just walking by, but has to be pretty intentional. So, you know, you have to remain at a school with no lawful business for being present at that place and with the intent to commit a crime. So again, the courts have really dug into that definition and defined it for the purposes of that provision. There was a provision of the law that was adopted by the voters a few years ago that would have prohibited registered sex offenders from residing within 2,000 feet of schools, and the court struck that down as unconstitutional. So now it's applied more on a case-by-case basis, only for certain particular registered offenders as provisions of their parole, basically. So that's kind of the high-level overview of some of these statutes. Obviously, there are more provisions, and it's typically handled in the criminal context.
Thank you.
Again, this is Doug Garrison. I just have a couple of slides left. I was going to note that the applicant is here, and I think they can do a much better job than me at explaining their internal policies, rules, program, that sort of thing, and I believe they'll get up and discuss that for you and do a better job than I could. So just, these are the two conditions that we drafted that we were proposing to add. One, adding that extra gate on the eastern side, and then the security cameras. That area that the last minute I drew in with red would be, we don't have an exact location for that gate. We'd work that out with the applicant and their architect, but it would be somewhere in that area. It might include constructing a new fence along the property line also to secure things. Right now it's just a hedge there, but that's the general idea. So that concludes the presentation. Staff's recommending approval of the project. Do note in the findings that it is exempt from environmental review as an existing facility. And we've made all the required findings for the coastal development permit, the use permit, the parking exception, and the site design review. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, clarifying questions of staff at this point? Steve? You got one? Commissioner Brennan?
Good evening, Doug. So, without implying any position of hostility or support with respect to the project, I had some questions. The first was, is the applicant actually the owner of the property now? Is that the case?
They are in contract to purchase it,
So they are not the owner currently?
not at the moment.
Okay, so there's a follow-up question about whether they can apply for a permit without the owner's engagement.
We do have, one of the owners did sign an application permitting them to, authorizing them to apply for the permits.
Okay, and they would be willing to abide by the conditions. The owner is willing to accept whatever they're on the hook.
If they want to open a workforce development center, yes.
Okay. On the east side of the property, the width of the walkway, as you said, it was rather small. How much distance, what is the distance from there to the eastern property line, roughly?
Are you talking about the public sidewalk or
The one that would be an access way for people, if I understood the staff.
That's
your
right
report.
now, the curb cut is, I believe, 7 or 8 feet, and then it widens out. So right now, it's a concrete driveway. It's about 8 feet wide. And then the concrete terminates right around the front of the building.
So probably didn't make my question clear. So I'm on Main Street, and I turn north. Sorry, I'm on Kelly, and I turn north onto the property. And on my right side, there's a little walkway that's too narrow to park additional cars in, right?
That,
And the distance from that to the eastern edge of the property, that's the number I'm looking for.
so yeah, that's essentially a existing driveway cut that at the curb, it's about 8 feet. I'm not entirely sure. I believe the property line is to the west of that hedge.
So maybe another 6 or 7 feet, or 10 feet, or just a couple of feet?
No, I think from the edge of concrete to the hedge is less than a foot.
Less than a foot, okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you. The conditions on the project called for it to be open from hours would be from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's 17 hours a day. And then there was a condition for an additional 2 hours, up to additional 2 hours for a period of limited duration, up to 3 times a week. And I just wanted to get clarity on what limited duration means in this context. Is it 3 times a week for a certain number of weeks a year, or 3 times a week for the first couple of months, or is the limited duration 2 hours additionally 3 times a week indefinitely? Help me understand.
Well, I can give you the evolution of this. The hours the applicant was proposing was from 7 in the morning till 3. We said, well, for the use permit, do we really want that etched in stone, or are you going to have some training sessions, or, at night, are you going to have, an AA meeting? Is there something that would go beyond that? And he said, well, yeah, we do have these training classes that sometimes go into the evening. And we said, well, what's a reasonable number? Is it 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11? And he said, well, usually 10 o'clock. And our position was, well, let's just sort of say, we don't want you to have to come back and amend the use permit every time you go to 11 o'clock. So 11 o'clock seemed like a good hour. 6 o'clock was an hour before when they proposed starting. So they just seemed like good numbers. I mean, there's no real science behind it. And then the notion was, it's a new program essentially, and they may find new services. They may find things that maybe there's higher demand to come in for some sort of computer literacy class or something. And so we said, we're not going to let you do it all the time, but let's say there's sort of every once in a while something that could go a little bit longer. And we said, well, let's say you could extend it 2 hours. You have to come to the community development director, and we would put some time limit on it. And if they're open 5 days a week, we said 2 or 3 days a week would be the limit. Again, I don't know any of this is actually etched in stone. It's sort of to get the conversation going and get some feedback.
Okay. I have other questions for later, but thank you.
Okay, very good. Do you have any other clarifying questions?
Jill just clarified something. Would you like to?
Thank you. We appreciate the question about hours, because I see now that we did not fully craft the condition correctly, and we apologize for that. The original condition had a much shorter day with the 3 extended days. What we were trying to do here is have 2 different limits. One limit being it never being closed, open after 11 p.m., but that there be general hours of operation that are have a shorter duration than that, and it's the several from time to time that it would be within that 11 p.m. Envelope. So that is a easy to adjust condition, and I think it's looking like this because we were working on it too much.
So I think what you're saying is item D1 would be the hours of operation are 6 to 11 or 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then a couple days a week it can be extended to additional hours to 11 p.m. as needed. Right. Does that make sense? Okay.
And actually, one of my questions for clarification is that in the staff report, it referred to it being open 5 days a week, and then on including Saturdays. And so I just wanted to clarify if it's regularly open weekdays, or one of the weekdays it's closed, or is that it? What are the days that the operation regularly?
We were working from the applicant's description. They said their proposed, typically they would be working 5 days a week, including Saturdays, and so they're closed on Sunday and 1 or 2 days during the week. We were not imposing a limitation on the number of days. That was more in the project description as to what they were typically proposing.
Any other questions? So I think you mentioned that the applicant was going to give a presentation. We should go ahead and do that now if you wish. Please. Please introduce yourself for the record. And again, if members of the public do wish to speak on this item, please fill out a green card. I do only have 2 green cards here, so if you're holding on to them, please bring them up.
Thank you very much.
Just go ahead and speak right down in that microphone. We have folks watching at home on TV, so.
Thank you very much for having us here tonight. Appreciate it. And I just wanted to clarify from the beginning, the last question on what days.
I'm sorry, is the green light on your microphone on there?
Am I not
Okay.
loud enough?
So you're a
Hello?
tall guy, you might need to get down in there, yeah.
I'll hold it like this. How's
There
that?
you go.
So just to clarify the last question, we're closed on Tuesdays and Saturdays. So our contract with the city to do the Coastside Clean Team includes Sunday mornings, so that we pick up litter from the Friday and Saturday at the beaches. So thank you. Our hope is to have our use approved, and our intent is to provide employment programming and personal development programming for folks who are experiencing homelessness, so that they can transition into housing, employment, sobriety, well-being, and health. Very excited about this project because I've been running Abundant Grace outside of my house for the last several years, and we're at a point now where I would really like us to have an office space and a location for people to gather to go to get work. As was mentioned, currently we gather at More for Less gas station for each work session. So we would be moving to a more secure private space, and we're trying to design the layout so that the entrance is clear, that people are supposed to come in through the driveway and enter the building through the backside, and our hope is to have a really nice landscaped area for people to gather, to access services, and to pursue employment and a better future. One thing that I'm very excited about is our partnership with Life Moves and Coastside Hope. We're hoping that both of those agencies will accept our invitation to have office space in the building. Life Moves has already indicated that they will. The reason that's important is because that agency provides case management, and they manage a contract with the county to provide permanent supportive housing vouchers, and they also operate shelters over the hill in San Mateo. So with the additional collaboration between our agencies, we're going to be able to provide more intensive services to people who really need it in a managed space. Other uses of the site, obviously showers, laundry, a mailing address, modest storage. Primarily, I'm concerned about handling people's valuables in a safe and secure way, particularly paperwork that they have that get lost often. In the garage, we'll have a large refrigerator for produce and a small clothing room where people can get better clothes to pursue work. And we're going to operate just a basic household kitchen for like making sandwiches, having breakfast, and getting ready to go for work. It's not a soup kitchen. This is not an overnight space. It's nothing like that. We really are intended to work with approximately 15 to 20 people, which I think will be accessing the service as they have been.
Any questions for the applicant at this time?
Thank you, Eric. I do have a question. You're probably the best person to answer this, but how would you respond to people who are voicing concerns about your clients and proximity to the schools and Boys and Girls Club?
So I've had some conversations with Deputy Saul Lopez and also the sheriff over the hill who's in charge of sex offender cases and that sort of thing, trying to understand AB 290 and the rules about how to treat people. Obviously, number one, we are going to comply with all laws around people who are dangerous to society, particularly sex offenders, which I understand people are concerned about. Anyone who's on the Megan's Law list site and has restrictions about being so close to a school will not be allowed to use our site. And I plan to keep open conversation with both Sheriff Lopez and I forget the other deputy's name, but we'll keep channels of communication open to make sure that folks are not there who should not be. I think, you know, we've tried to devise the layout so that people enter, there's no loitering allowed outside, there's no alcohol or drugs allowed on the premises, no fighting, all that sort of thing. But we're trying to create a space that's welcoming for people to come to the rear of the building. And we will always have staff on site whenever people are there, and we will be alert and watchful.
Commissioner Polgar?
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. You mentioned that you serve about 15 to 20 people, and that's currently kind of the numbers. And is that what you anticipate continuing to serve about?
So for the Coastal Clean Team, we take out 5 people. And for the farm, we take out 10 to 12. I say 10 to 15 because sometimes more people show up, and we have to do a lottery because we can't accommodate both financially and management-wise a larger number of people.
Additional questions you have, Ned?
And I wanted to clarify one thing. There, a couple times it was mentioned counseling, and my understanding of that is it's career counseling that goes along with workforce services. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Career counseling and then case management.
Okay, great. If there's no other questions, we're going to go ahead and open up the public comment period. And I'd just like to say, regardless of what happens with this, thank you for everything that you've done in this community. I've watched in awe as you've been working here for many years now, so I appreciate everything you've done. So with that, we're going to open up the public comment period. Like I said, I've got 2 cards here. And our first speaker is going to be Jason Silva. Okay, go ahead and get right into the microphone there.
Okay, this is awkward. I don't normally come out and do this. It's kind of nerve-wracking, but I'm completely excited about this project. It's personal for me because growing up, I was a sibling of 3 who was homeless with my mother. And there wasn't projects like this that had comfort stations where you can go and find a place of refuge to maybe take a shower, get replanted in a community, find a job, case management, those type of things. Luckily, we had a family come alongside us and help us, and as a result, we all flourished from it. And I think this project's doing that will do that for a lot of people. So The other concern I know people have is the segregation part of trying to keep this type of community away from other type of communities. But the truth is, when you're in those situations, I think integrating those people adds value, great value, not only for the people that are homeless, because they learn that there is possibility, there is a way, but the people who give back, they get just as much. And so, again, I'm not comfortable doing this, but I had to get in there and just say that I'm really excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next speaker. Meta Townsley.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Maida Townsley, and I'm a mother of a child at Cunha. Has also volunteered and worked with Eric in working with his board now for about a year. I wrote down my notes so that last time I think at the city council meeting I maybe went on and on and on, so this will hopefully limit me. Homelessness is not an identity, it's an experience. Abundant Grace Coastside workers are trying to change their situation. Eric meets these individuals where they are. These folks didn't choose to be homeless. Circumstances beyond their control, lack of financial resources, job loss, mental illness, poor decision making, and missing a support group have been factors that result in many individuals to become homeless. Eric treats the individuals experiencing homelessness with dignity and respect. Because of Eric's engagement, these folks decide to take the first step to go to work, even without a shower. Through Abundant Grace Coastside Workers 2 programs, cleaning Half Moon Bay beaches and harvesting food on an organic farm, the workers begin to regain their self-confidence, begin to feel part of a team, and feel successful. As the workers begin to believe in themselves again, they're able to take the next steps to seek out the social services, mental health, and substance abuse programs. Through Abundant Grace Coastside Workers partnerships, many of these workers gain employment and move into permanent housing. I have a son at Cunha. My son is aware of homelessness in Half Moon Bay and in other cities that we visit. I want my son to know that being homeless is not a crime. It's not a goal of anyone. Because someone may be homeless, he or she is not automatically a criminal. I want my son to know there are people in the world like Eric who want to help those who are homeless. I want my son to see an organization that helps people help themselves. Eric provides a safe, dignified, and respectful opportunity for someone who's experiencing homelessness to begin to make good decisions. If you've ever spoken with a homeless individual, you would learn that the most difficult thing about being homeless isn't the cold or safety. It's being ignored by other human beings. I want to teach my son not to ignore our neighbors because they don't look like us or they don't live in a house. As a community, let's teach our kids that being homeless isn't an identity, it's a situation that Abundant Grace Coastside Workers organization is helping our neighbors to move out of.
Thank you. The next speaker is Clint Miller.
I'd like to speak in support of this issue.
Go ahead and speak right down to the microphone. Make sure it's on, pick it up, swallow it if you have to.
All right. Thank you. I'm trainable. I'd like to speak in support of this issue. And I think we need to realize that what is being proposed here is not just to help the homeless, which it will do, but this will benefit the entire city. This is an issue that everybody sees, not only the people who live here, who vote here, but the people who come here. They all see this. if we can deal with this, we will help everybody who comes here. So please, let's give this man a permit.
Thank you. If I can ask, if you could just, if people could hold back from the applause, we want to make sure everybody feels comfortable speaking. So, our next speaker, Ellen Clark. And this is the last speaker's card that I have. So, if you do wish to speak, please fill out a card and get it to us.
I'm a 16-year resident of Half Moon Bay, and I've been aware of the presence of the homeless in the community for a while. I've spent about a year volunteering with Eric's program, and I want to thank Meta Townsley for everything she said so eloquently about what it means to be homeless in this community. Everything that I see about everything that I've experienced in volunteering with Eric's program has shown me that this particular project is well worth investing in, and I sincerely hope that you approve this project.
Thank you. Got another card. You can go ahead and go speak, and you can just turn in your card when you're done. Or is it for somebody else? Okay. All right, great. John Allback, if I got that right.
Hello, my name is John Allback. I'm a former teacher at Reardon High School. I was there for 24 years. I didn't stay retired long because I retired in June, but I was lucky enough to be asked by Eric to help supervise the group of people, men and women, that go out and clean the beaches for 4 days a week. They are the most conscientious people I've ever been around. They have, you might think that, they would just put in their time, look like they're doing what we ask them to do, and then collect the money at the end. They do more than we ask them to. They don't let a cigarette butt get by them. I won't say you're able to eat off the parking lot at Poplar Beach when we're through, but it's as clean as it can be. They're also, but the other thing I'm really impressed with is their sense of humor. They kid each other. They kid me. I've the other day, one of them who lives with his buddy Joseph, who just got a job. He got hired by Ace Hardware the other day. Very intelligent young man. Well, he and Eric camp out near they live near the beach. Their tents are out there. So Eric told me the other day, he said, Joseph and I are going to go camping. So I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but I didn't have to, because within a few minutes we were laughing out loud. I said, that's quite a paradox, Eric. You're going camping. But they are. And the other thing, besides how conscientious they are and what a great sense of humor, they take care of each other. If something happens with one of them, you know it. You show up and you hear that something's happened with so-and-so, someone else is dealing with a problem. One woman is taking a man over to San Mateo because he can hardly see, and he needs to go there and jump through their bureaucratic hoops to get the glasses that he needs. So that they're really an impressive group, and I trust that you'll give them a new home. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is John Mosley. John Mosley. Sorry about that.
Green means on, yeah. Okay. My name's John Mosley. I live in El Granada, and I served 8 years on the Cabrillo Unified School District School Board. I served several terms as president. We rotated our presidency. Spent 8 years protecting and trying to provide the best school district for our local children, and they are still my concern. So, as we deal with this situation next to Cunha, why would we not want to have a facility where there is direction and oversight of homeless people that may be passing down Kelly Street in front of our school anyway? While I was on the board, we deliberated very strongly over where the site of our new middle school would be. And it was myself, among others, that moved the site from Wavecrest to the center of town so that the children could be a part of the center of town. So to address the concerns of parents that would be concerned that nefarious individuals would be associated with their children, I can only say that in life experience, your kids are going to be out in the world. And when you have people here that are developing a program to get those who have had unfortunate circumstances or poor decisions in their lives to rehabilitate under direction and guidance of not only law, the Sheriff's Department, and you, the Planning Commission, who ensures that all laws are complied with, then why not have it built here? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Please, no. That is the last speaker card I have. So with that, unless somebody wants to speak, we're going to close the public comment period, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. So who wants to start? Commissioner Benjamin.
So first, it's great to have a crowd at the Planning Commission meeting. I think this may be the biggest one I've seen in a while. So our LCP doesn't rate this, Eric. So I also have a great deal of respect for Eric. I've had a chance to get to know him in other contexts, and like my colleagues and many of the audience, his work is really admirable. That said, our job as a planning commission is not to approve projects we like or to disapprove projects we don't like. It is to assess the compliance of projects with our laws and regulations, because we are a nation of laws, not men. And we have an establishment clause in the Constitution that means that even good causes don't get a pass. So the questions that you're hearing that scrutinize details of this project are about that. And I think it's really important for the commission and staff and everyone in the room today to feel comfortable having that conversation and not cast dispersions on people who raise a different point of view than one might have. So bear that in mind, please. I'd like to go back to the one of the aspects of the project design that I did not understand, and that was, and I see that the architect is in the audience, so it might be with the chair's consent, I can inquire of him. Can you tell me how the lighting around the facility's exterior works? There was a reference to floodlight something or other in the...
Mr. Love, if you could go up to the microphone and entertain a couple questions.
And while you're on your way up, maybe you can help us understand if there's a nexus between that and the proposed additional condition for video cameras and its ability to capture activity at night. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Ed Love. I'm the architect for the Abundant Grace Project. And to answer Commissioner Benjamin's question about lighting, all around the building, and I think we've shown it on the elevations of the building, there will be dark sky floodlights that are controlled both by motion, by switches, and also with a daylight sensor on it, so that anybody walks near it, they'll go on. or they can be all turned on at certain times if there's people there.
Does it light the grounds, or does it light the building, or does it?
No, they're on the building, shining down on the ground, around the perimeter of the building.
I see. Okay, that helps. Thank you for the explanation. If I could ask Eric a little bit more, I got the impression about the number. So I heard about the existing number of people. What is the target as the program evolves? What is the number of people that we expect to be? Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have asked. Again, I don't want to be out of turn here. Thanks, Ed.
So the target is 0, right? I mean, we'd love for that. I'm not being funny, I'm really serious, but my sense is that we will not grow much beyond where we are in that space. That's a fairly small space. The clean team right now is at a certain place in its budget, and I don't see that increasing very much, which means it's pretty solid at 5, 6 people. And the farm is the same thing. We're limited by staff and cars and space and management. So we don't have an aggressive strategic plan to grow. We have a plan just to remain stable how we are and to build that in more solidly over the next several years.
And so we did get a comment letter, it's in the record, expressing concern about folks approaching or being in the vicinity from adjacent property owners. And I just wonder, since, as you pointed out, this is not a housing project, if you see an evolution, is there a nexus between this and other envisioned housing, or is this unrelated to those projects? How do we manage your clientele's approach to the building in a way that respects the rights of those property owners as well?
Okay, if I understand. So what I anticipate happening in the morning is that people would come in the driveway into the rear of the property. We'd determine how many people could go to work, and if there were a few extra that couldn't get on the job that morning, they might choose to take a shower or do laundry. Most people, when we gather for work now, once we have the lottery drawing, disperse, and they don't loiter around more for less. They go somewhere else.
Yeah, and there's a parking exception in the proposal. As the staff report points out, a lot of the clientele wouldn't be driving to the facility.
They walk or bicycle.
Right, and I'm just wondering, in your experience, do you envision an increase of density of people in the vicinity, but not on your parcel, prior to opening, after? Is there some program to help address the concern that was raised by the neighbor in her letter, his letter?
You mean before we get to work, who's going to be there?
Yeah, once they're on the property, I see how you plan to deal with it. It's inside, they aggregate inside, it's all good. There are hours that the place is not open, and people need to get there, and they're not driving in some cases. So I'm thinking they may already be kind of around. Right. I'm trying to figure out if this creates a magnet for more people to be around, and if so, how we manage that. I hope I'm asking in a way that doesn't communicate.
Are people going to be hanging out before we open? Is that what you mean?
Or after closure.
Okay. So I'm envisioning getting there early in the morning before people start to gather. So we're going to open at 7, but there's no work until 8. Usually people show up at about 7:45 until 8. So there's a relatively brief period of time that people have been gathering at More for Less gas station. And I've gone early to try to track when people do show up, and it's usually 7:45. So for that first 45 minutes, there may be someone or a couple of people showing up to get a shower or to start laundry, but my sense is most people aren't going to be up that early.
Right, and the target, the segment that we're serving are our homeless community within the city of Half Moon Bay.
That's correct.
I'm envisioning folks who maybe are, you know, yeah, in the Caltrans area underneath the highway. Is that is that typical target?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I'll let my colleagues speak up while I digest that. Thank you.
Commissioner Reddick?
Thank you.
You can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you very much.
I wasn't going to cross-examine you, Eric.
This isn't.
I echo Vice Chair Benjamin's description of what the process is here, but I'm quite happy personally with the analysis staff has done. I'm a great admirer of the Abundant Grace programs, and I feel quite inadequate in describing the power of those compared to what Eric can do and what several members of the public have already spoken to. But as far as the concept of the dignity of work, which Eric speaks very eloquently about, I've seen that firsthand with the Clean Team. I live pretty close to Poplar Beach, and my family and I are often walking down Poplar Path and seeing the Clean Team in action. About a month ago, I went out Sunday morning to get the Sunday paper out of the driveway, and during the night, somebody, not me, but somebody had smashed this big liter bottle of Bacardi rum right in the middle of the street. And I went back in and I got a broom, and as I was starting to clean up, trying to deal with it, two members of the Clean Team came up and insisted on helping. So I rounded up a couple of more brooms, and we finished it very quickly. And so we know some of those people, and we often thank them for their hard work, and I see that the self-esteem that does bring to members of the Clean Team. And I guess I'm sensitive, and I can understand how parents with kids in Cunha might have that kind of a reaction. But the truth is that Eric's clients are not a bunch of people that all of a sudden are being bussed into Half Moon Bay from somewhere else in the country. They're members of the community today, and have been for, in the cases of some or many, have been for a long time. And to imagine that setting up this refuge and this development center would make matters worse doesn't make sense to me. So I'm very supportive of the project.
I actually would echo very strongly what Commissioner Ruddock just said. I don't know that I actually have a lot to add. My thoughts on this are similar in the sense that I was very happy with the staff analysis, and I'm supportive of adding in those two conditions. And so I think that it's completely consistent. I'm excited about the project. And I agree. I mean, when I can understand obviously the reaction of and the concerns raised in some of the letters that I've read. But I mean, my feeling is that this is these members of our community are here, and frankly, the services that Abundant Grace is already providing these services in that same location, in the same areas. So I'm excited to see this have an actual kind of site for it that is well designed and provides the actual facilities that are needed to really step up the workforce services that are provided. So I didn't have any, other than the questions I asked for clarification, I didn't have any other kind of concerns or questions relating to the analysis of its consistency with the LUP or the zoning code. And yeah, so I don't have any other comments or questions at this point.
Okay, you digested? Microphone.
Sorry, I'm back on now. So I appreciate the questions. Now my remaining questions are for staff. Do we have alternate language to clarify the hours that we can include, or do we need to chew on that a bit?
I think Chair Holt picked right up on it. We should have kept the 9 o'clock close time with the addition of occasionally having programs that extend past that, but in no case past 11. So I think, as he suggested, instead of 11 p.m. in condition D1, it would be either 8 or 9 o'clock p.m.
Okay, thank you. On the condition, one of the conditions, or maybe it was in the description, said if the management or the owner, I forget, it wasn't management, it was something, if the project was abandoned or if it changed management or ownership, thank you, the permit expires. And I just want to understand what the permitted use would be in the parcel after that. Is it still, it's a commercial, it's the pre-existing commercial?
The condition referred to
Microphone.
is D5, and the intent was, partly because of just concern raised, that Eric is sort of the heart and soul of this, and a lot of this approval, if it is approved, is based on that trust, and so we wanted to make it clear that in the future this can't morph into something else. It is zoned for commercial uses. Many active businesses could go in there without any additional permits. A few would require a use permit. So the site improvements are covered under the coastal development permit. That's valid. Parking exception would essentially remain valid. And then if somebody wanted to do something that required a use permit, they would have to reapply for that.
So the parking exception would survive the end of the use permit?
Well, I think we'd have to review, if somebody came in with a proposal for a restaurant that was going to require 50 parking spaces, we would take another look at that. If it was most of the commercial uses in downtown offices, most of that stuff is the same parking ratio, 1 per 250 square feet. And because this was developed originally as a single-family home, it didn't have the parking that you would have on something that was developed from the ground up. So chances are we would approve some kind of parking exception for a low-intensity use just because of the feasibility of changing it.
Thank you for the answer. So my concern is that I don't think the broadness of what would be permitted as a right, permitted by right in a commercial area, should necessarily, for example, a restaurant is a really good example of something that could have a high impact on the need for parking, and I think we'd want an opportunity to review that at a site as sensitive as the intersection of Kelly and Maine. So I'm a little concerned about that particular aspect of this coastal development permit surviving if the project ends. Obviously,
I guess, I'm sorry, if just to
carry on.
get some clarity. I'm a little bit confused in what you're saying, in that how would approval of this change anything that could go in there today?
Well, that was the thrust of my question, which is that we're approving, if we go forward with this, we're approving a parking exception, and that means that a new use that could have additional parking demands, for example, a restaurant, wouldn't have to apply for a parking exception.
So if I could to staff, would the parking exception go away with the use permit, or?
We could amend the condition to say that any new use would be de novo, essentially reviewed for parking, that sort of thing. I would note something like a restaurant would trigger a new coastal development permit just because of the change of intensity of use. So not to require a coastal development permit is rare.
But it wouldn't require a use permit because
No.
it's permitted as a matter of right.
Right.
I'm going to pop in a little bit. So the existing condition of this development has non-conforming parking to a certain extent, which is relative to the 1 per 250 parking ratio that Doug referenced. A new use that was subject to a use permit that had a higher parking demand would not be able to bring this parking exception forward. It would be a new evaluation of the parking. So we were really looking very carefully at this case relative to what was there before, because it had legal non-conforming parking. And in fact, we believe that the parking demand for this use is likely substantially similar or possibly even a little bit lower than what was there before. So that makes this parking exception consideration a little bit simpler than something where you might have a really big change of use. I can't see how staff would support something like that in the future. The coastal development permit would really bring those impacts out.
So it sounds like they're convinced that they'd consider the parking regardless of that, even if this parking exception survived the expiration of the use permit, a new parking exception would be required for anything that required more than the legal non-conforming parking prior to this project going forward.
I think that's fair.
Okay, that's much clearer to me. I appreciate the concern. Can I opine?
Please.
So, for me, this is a challenging project because I think it has so much good that has been so well articulated by so many of you, and of course, in our own experience. It does carry risks, risks that are unforeseeable and that don't depend on a lack of care and intention. I had an experience a while back where another well-intentioned program that served our homeless community was unintentionally dumping untreated sewage into our streams. And no one would suggest for a moment that that was intended, but it happened. And so there are aspects of the project that create liability that concern me. That said, I feel like the project deserves an opportunity. I noticed that there's a condition that holds the city harmless in the event that something goes south. My intuition is that unlike a lot of other applicants, that the pockets probably aren't deep enough to actually hold the city harmless here, that if we got into a situation, it might turn out to be a pretty expensive situation, but I could be completely off about that. The hours of operation are substantially longer than a lot of the other activities in this area. On the other hand, most of them are not residential, so I see less of an impact than I would say if this were in a neighborhood or maybe adjacent to a church or some other very sensitive use. And I am mindful of CUSD and the concerns that parents have expressed. At the same time, and I think it's worth articulating them, people have a right to express that view and not feel bullied by people who think the project is so good that they should be shamed into acquiescing. I think it's more important to have the dialogue and have an understanding. And I think that the challenge, the onus and the challenge is on the applicant to show them just what a great neighbor it can be, and to have the opportunity for constructive interaction, as Mr. Mosley suggested, doctor, I think it is, forgive me, in his comments. So I'm going to support this. I'm willing to give it a go. But I do think that we should go into this with a very careful eye and be ready to adapt to surprises, because men make plans and God laughs. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. And, appreciate your acknowledgement of the risk, and I think that's one of the great things about our community is we're willing to take some risks and go forward to do what's right. So I'm absolutely going to support this project. I think it's a great project. I think it's a great location, in that a lot of the risk and the concern that others have mentioned aren't necessarily new. These are members of our community now, and this is a way for us to really bring them forward, integrate them, and make sure we're not pushing them off into the shadows. So, so I'm very supportive of that. I do have 2 kids who go to school at Hatch and will go to school at Cunha, and I'm entirely comfortable with them seeing the realities of the world. So, so for that, I thank you for bringing this forward. I appreciate all the public statements. I think you all said it much more eloquently than any of us could. And with that, I'm ready to entertain a motion. And
So I'd like to move the resolution next in order with the amendment to the hours that were suggested by the Community Development Director in her reply to the question, and with the additional conditions that are presently on the screen with respect to the installation of a gate and security cameras.
we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
They're approved. Thank you all. And with that, that is our one and only item. Let's go ahead and just maybe take a minute to let people clear out. And so we'll take a 5-minute break. wrap this thing up. Okay, let's bring it back to the Planning Commission to Director's Report.
Excellent, thank you. Planning Commission agenda forecast for the rest of 2019, November 26th, we have informed you, and we will post a cancellation notice. That is Thanksgiving week, and I think it's appropriate to give the commission a break, especially considering how many extra meetings you've had. And we'll see you then on December 10th. We're planning to bring zoning amendment work to you, some of the work that Sarah Clark and I presented to you back in July, mostly focused downtown about uses and parking, as well as some housing items. All right, City Council, just a couple things related to the commission. On November 5th, they made the first reading for the update to the California Building Standards Code, which included local amendments that are specific to Half Moon Bay and consistent with the fire district. The second reading will be November 19th. The new code will be in effect January 1st. You will see changes in some of the standard conditions of approval on projects that you're looking at, in particular for required solar panels on single-family homes. There are also some requirements about pre-wiring for and or installing EV charging stations for different kinds of development. So you'll see some shift in that, which I think is aligned, frankly, with some of the conditions that you've been working on with our applicants. On December 3rd with City Council will be our Measure D update. So we will find out how many certificates are going to be available for 2020. We will let you know. And we are working on an ordinance for renter security measures. Architectural Advisory Committee has their second meeting on November 21st. They will see the Main Street mixed-use project that you saw on October 22nd. And we have excellent input from you, and we'll be forwarding your the approved minutes to that committee. They're also going to look at a parklet that was proposed in front of Cafe Society. This is a pilot project that has really kind of come through the city manager's office to work on having some revitalization of different blocks of downtown. This is just one spot to see how it works. We're trying to figure out drainage and also needing it to be temporary, because we have to have big parades here from time to time and other kinds of events. So there's a lot of special conditions around having this kind of seating out in the public right-of-way. Half Moon Bay's downtown sidewalks are really narrow, and that there's several reasons why we don't have a lot of sidewalk cafe life here, and that's one of them. So this could be really a good thing to check out. So we'll show you how that's going. Parks and Recreation Commission on December 11th will give their comments on the draft Poplar Gateways plan. We tucked one into everybody's packet, so you know what they're looking at. You'll see it later with environmental review and a coastal development permit. But you've already seen components leading up to it. We frankly call them the phase 0 components of that plan. The safety fencing, that access that you saw recently, and the like. So December 11th is kind of the last big thing we're hoping to do this year in public forum. That's when our meetings kind of wind down. Tomorrow, I'm going to see a new house at 415 Chesterfield in a director hearing. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jill. Any Planning Commission communications to report?
Through the chair, I just wondered if any of my colleagues went to the transportation, the final section of the, I'm interested in hearing about it. I got called away at the last minute. It was embarrassing not to be able to go.
I did attend. It was quite good, and I be happy to give an overview to any of you individually or as a group. That said, the attendance was lighter. Their notice was just not as effective as it had been for the previous 2 sessions. And they understood that. They also want to offer a different forum for the next training session. They're not going to stop this. They think there's some good momentum. They've had positive feedback from the planning commissioners who've attended from the other cities. They see opportunities for cross-training and camaraderie in your arena. So you'll see something, I think, in first quarter of 2020. It may have a more social sort of format with some experts in the room on selected topics, and I'll try to keep you posted. I think I might have missed the first notice on that one, and I'm sorry about it. Our email volume is tremendous, and it's hard to catch them all. So are they sending you emails?
I did see an email, and my feedback to them was better icebreakers and dumpster fires.
All right, thank you.
Any other planning commission communications report? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.